Photoprophilators, welcome back to my channel. Today we're exploring Maedowbrook Gardens. In the previous video I showed you what's happening here in Maedowbrook Gardens as we came up Meadowbrook Drive. We're back on Meadowbrook Drive now. I showed you the southern half. This is the southern half of Maedowbrook Gardens, and what I want to do now is to show you the northern side of Meadowbrook Drive. As I'm in this neck of the woods, I figure I might as well show you a little more of the neighborhood. Like I said, a lot of these homes were built in the 1960s and 1970s, and the architecture reflects that. The clay brick, the clay brick construction gives you an idea. So the first thing you notice is that the house lots are much larger than in other sections of the city. The clay brick construction based on the the facade. You can see clay brick. We had a clay brick factory in this country back in the 1980s, and clay brick was the preferred method or material to use for constructing homes. And so a lot of these homes were built back in the 1980s. You also know that they're 1980s homes because of the concrete construction, right? Before then, a lot of the homes were wooden. Homes were built before the 1980s, and in the 1980s tended to be wood and concrete. So wood on the upper floor and concrete on the ground floor. But after some time, right after say the 1990s and the 2000s, people started modifying or building homes that are entirely of concrete, because of course they didn't have to contend with termites, because that's the biggest problem with living in the tropics. The homes that are built of wood eventually get wood ants and termite damage, and so that is why a lot of the homes here in this neck of the woods are built with concrete. Now concrete is a lot hotter, a lot more energy to cool, but because it's more durable, your home would probably last longer and not eventually be eaten up by termites. And that's the main reason for the style of homes that were built here in Meadowbrook Gardens in the 2000s and beyond, because it's also quite expensive, and so a lot of these people actually came back after migrating abroad, came back and built their homes with money they earned from living abroad. And so that's the nature of the neighborhood. This is the northern half of Meadowbrook Gardens. Further north of this neighborhood, there is north of this neighborhood, I believe there is Durban Backlands. We'll check that out in a future video. Little dog. Hey doggy, what's happening? So these homes were probably built in the 2000s, right? The ones that are much larger, or maybe even modified in the 2000s, here in Meadowbrook Gardens. And reflect the styles, that is the size, right? Because some of these homes are probably as big as the homes that were popular down in Georgia and Florida, right? The styles, first of all, the styles could be accommodated because of the lots, the size of the lots. This is a large lot, this is a large ranch house on a large lot. And the other side, I think that is Sophia, which eventually now has homes, was a squatting area, now has homes, official homes. But yeah, this is Meadowbrook Gardens in 2023. These homes were probably built in the 1990s, 2000s. The ones with wood construction were probably built before, back in the 1980s, for example, when wood construction was preferred method. Hey doggy, what's happening? So now the dog saying hello. right? But the architecture reflected what was popular at the time, and that's what allows you to put a date on the homes. The split levels were popular in the 1980s, 1970s. So this is probably, the slope of the roof is what I'm calling a split level. Probably a style from the 1980s, 1970s, 1980s, so it was built later on in the 1990s and 2000s because somebody probably still liked it when they built these homes in the 2000s. This is what Meadowbrook Gardens looks like in 2023. Like I said, a lot of these homes were either remodeled more recently or built. The clay brick, so that's the clay brick on the street from when we had a clay brick factory in this country, right back in the 1980s. The 1980s, I think, is when the clay brick factory was operating, and a lot of these streets were built out of clay brick because clay brick was plentiful back then. So this is the equivalent of, say, Pradoville 1 and Pradoville 2. On the other side, that used to be plantation lots. It used to be that land used to be a lot of cane fields and so on, but now it's residential. Sophia. We'll take a look at that in some new videos, in some future videos. But this is an older neighborhood compared to Sophia. Maedowbrook Gardens, and this is what was built back in the heyday of the, let's say, the 1980s, 1990s, when people were optimistic, when people of means, people who were public servants, you know, in the upper echelons of the society at that time, were able to purchase a large plot of land and build a home. Morning. Out in what was, well, it was far enough away to be a suburb, but now it's actually in the center of the city, right? But to be able to live in this section of the city, you needed to be able to purchase a large plot of land, and a lot of that negotiating, in other words, getting that land, meant you needed to have some kind of connections to political class. So that is the story behind Meadowbrook Gardens. Some of you have actually lived in this neck of the woods and know the story better than I do, and you probably should share it. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't grow up in this neck of the woods. I did actually visit a lot and had friends here, so my memory might not be the same as yours or as accurate as yours if you've lived in this neck of the woods. So if you've lived here, share the story of Meadowbrook Gardens with us in the comments below. This, for example, by architecture tells me it was built back in the 1980s. The wood at the top and the concrete at the bottom. This also probably 1990s. The facade was popular in the 1980s. You know, that large concrete facade in the front of the house. The split level was popular in the 1970s and 1980s, and so on. So that is what I'm going on. This is Meadowbrook Gardens. You need to go on Google Maps to figure out the names of the streets. But this full concrete house was probably built in the 1990s, 1980s, 1990s, because back then people were beginning to convert away from wood because of the problem we have with termites. But then eventually they started building much larger homes. This was probably built in the 2000s, right? Architecture tells you it's probably built in the 2000s because, you know, people started migrating and remigrating back to Guyana, and eventually adopted some of the styles, right? Some of the styles of the homes that they were accustomed to living back in the 1980s and the 1990s. What's the next? I think this is a playground, a little reserve land. But this, guys, this is what's happening here in Maedowbrook Gardens. There's another home that is undergoing some renovation. This is probably an extension to an older home. Not necessarily older because the architecture seems fairly modern, but it's kind of being rebuilt to be larger. This one, for example, might have been built in the 1980s, 1990s. The wooden parts of it are again experiencing termite damage. This is why, for example, a lot of people converted their wooden homes to concrete homes, because the termite damage was not, you know, the homes were not damaged by termites as much if they were built out of wood. Alright, so that's what made a lot of the people, a lot of residents convert from wood to concrete, because the problem was with termite damage. And that's a good example of why. So this is what's happening. Morning. So this is what's happening in this neck of the woods. This is Maedowbrook Gardens in 2023. And from what you can see, some of the architecture reflects the taste of North America. Basically, some of these homes, the ones that are now being built, right, the ones that are built, say, in the 2010s and beyond, are built in the architecture of the American South. But some of these older homes were built in 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and the architecture here represents what was popular in Guyana at the time. It's the roof actually that gives it away, right? Because the shape of the roof, of these homes represents what was popular, what was possible in terms of construction back in that time, right? Because it depended on what the local construction people could build. But as you move around the neighborhood, you can see, for example, that these homes, such as this one with the garage out front, right? This is popular in Canada, right? Most of the homes, say, in Ontario, Mississauga, some of the new developments were built with a garage door prominently out front, because in those parts of the world, you know, you want your car to be indoors in winter, and you want to be able to drive into your garage to unload your groceries and so on. And so that became popular. Those homes with a garage out front were popular after people remigrated from having lived abroad. But this with a carport, you know, underneath the house is what was popular, what was usual for the tropics, because you don't have to deal with snow, you don't have to shovel snow. All you need to do is to keep your car out of the weather, so that, let's say, when you come in, if it's raining, you can drive right up under your house and get out without getting wet, or get into your car in the morning when it's raining and not get wet. That's what's happening here, guys. That's what's happening in this neck of the woods. This is Maedowbrook Gardens in 2023. If you're familiar with this neck of the woods, you've lived here before, and you know the story of how this neighborhood was built, you know, and who were the original residents. Perhaps you were one of them. And share that story with us. Let us know the history of Maedowbrook Gardens in now it's 2023, but when it was built back in the 1960s, 70s and 1980s when it was new, because it was actually fairly new, right? I think we're back on Jamoon Drive, right? It's the main access roads to Meadowbrook Gardens are Jamoon Drive and Meadowbrook Drive. Meadowbrook Drive in the middle and Jamoon on the northern end. So we're at the northern end of Meadowbrook Gardens. So this is what it looks like in 2023. So if you've lived in this neck of the woods, or you're familiar with the history of Meadowbrook Gardens, how it was built, why it was built, how the land was acquired in a portion, and who built their homes here, share that information with us. In the other side, I believe that is Durban Backlands. We're going to take a look at Durban Backlands in a future video. But in this neck of the woods, it tended to be people who were in the upper echelons of the public service. This, for example, a large lot afforded a large home. There were also people who were part of the political elite, or who were connected to the political elite back then. On the other side, that's Durban Backlands. And therefore we're able to use those connections to purchase these homes. So that's what's up, guys. Have you looked at this street before? Not certain I did. Yes, I think I did. So that's what's up. On the other side, I think that's a school, Meadowbrook. That's Durban Backlands, and somewhere behind there is the Seventh-day Adventist Hospital and so on. But this is Meadowbrook Gardens in 2023. As you said, we are going through a period of rapid economic expansion, rapid economic growth, when eventually all of these neighborhoods are going to be transformed by the sheer volume of capital flowing into the country, and people with access to capital eventually, you know, modify their homes, build bigger homes. And so that's what it's looking at. That's what it looks like now, but there's no guarantee that these homes will even be the same in 10 years, because the country is undergoing a rapid economic expansion, rapid growth in the economy at about 50% or more per annum, and a lot of that capital is going into housing development, into building new homes, new housing developments, what we used to call housing schemes in Guyana. And people are moving out of the city, moving on up. The city is spreading out. There's a new city that is being built or planned. This, I think, was the Lodge Secondary School. Lodge Secondary School over here. I'm not familiar with this school because didn't even know it was here. But this is Lodge Secondary School. Pretty good if you're in this neck of the woods. If you're in this neighborhood, you probably will be close to school. Those of you who are familiar with Lodge Secondary School here in Durban Backlands, Meadowbrook Gardens, let me know what you know about it. But this is Meadowbrook Gardens in 2023, and as I was saying, there is a rapid expansion of the economy now, and eventually a lot of these homes, which were built in the 1980s, 1990s, are going to be modified and expanded, transformed, because of, you know, the growing access to capital. I think I know this home. I had a friend who used to live in this home. We used to come and visit every weekend, and it's now quite busy. We'll take a look at the other side, Durban Backlands, in a future video. But for now, this is what's happening in this neck of the woods. If you want to see more content like this, click like and subscribe. Maedowbrook Gardens in the year 2023. If you used to live in this neighborhood, you know more about it than I do, and you want to share some of your knowledge about the history of this neighborhood, share them in the comments below. On the other side, a lot of this neighborhood is actually much newer, because I remember visiting this neighborhood back in the 1990s, 1980s, when these homes didn't exist. So these are actually fairly new homes now, and we're going to take a look at them in the next video. But that's what's happening here in this neck of the woods. Later! Meadowbrook Gardens, and we're heading back to, that's Mandela Avenue.